Hello and welcome back to This Week in Events, where every week we cover news, tech and insights from the world of meetings, conferences and corporate events. My name is Maria Franzoni, International Speaker Bureau owner, and
I'm James Taylor, keynote speaker and founder of Speakers U. Welcome to episode 2 of This Week in Events. And if you're joining us for the first time, you're in for an absolute treat. We're going to be covering some really cool, maybe controversial topics today as well, but that's part of the thing. So as we're kind of going through this, please leave comments, questions. What are your thoughts on it? The more, the merrier. So we're going to be talking about We Make Events and what that's all about, what's been happening for the Global Action Day. We're going to be talking about studio kits, who provides them, who pays for them, for speakers, for events. And then finally, we're going to be very topical, event moderators. After the US presidential debate that happened this week, we're going to be talking about the role of moderators. So are you ready, Maria? Shall we get into the show?
Oh, I am so ready. I've been really looking forward to this all week after we survived last week.
Thank you for all your lovely comments, for everyone. Wonderful comments. And thank you so much for kind of coming here and being with us. And this is wonderful. So this is what we want this community. So the first story we thought we'd cover is We Make Events, hashtag We Make Events. So this is something a couple of my friends who are in the events industry kind of started telling me about, and then it really came to a kind of head yesterday where they had something called the Global Action Day. And this is all the people that are involved in doing events. Primarily is Europe and North America, although it's a bit more kind of global than that. They've kind of come together in order to try to put pressure on national governments to support the events industry. And it's kind of amazing. They shared some stats, which I didn't really know about. In the UK alone, this industry, of which we're all part, the events industry, is worth nearly £100 billion a year. That kind of blew my mind.
Wow.
I don't know if
wow. In this country.
Just in this country. Just in the UK. So I think when we kind of looked into it, you broke that down, the part that we're mostly involved in, you and I, Maria, which is conferences and events, corporate events, that's about £18 billion, about $25 million every single year. So what's been kind of going on is, in order to try and raise the consciousness of politicians around the world about the role of events and how much we contribute to national economies, this organization came together last night. They lit up lots of buildings all around the world in red in order to kind of highlight the events industry. And really what they're kind of fighting for as an industry is just to be recognized for the value that we put in and to get some kind of support. So depending on where you're watching from today, Maria and I were based in the UK. And here in the UK, we can't really do conferences just now. In-person conferences is just not possible at the moment. But we've essentially, as an industry, we've been told we can't do anything, but yet at the same time, we're not really getting support. So an interesting kind of thing came up this last week, actually, which was kind of talking about, is this industry and our many jobs in this industry even viable anymore? So the person that puts up that staging of the stage that you go and speak on, is that a viable job anymore if we're not going to return to this? So Maria, what's been your take on, because I know you've been kind of watching it as well and you're obviously involved. And I almost feel that sometimes as a speaker, we're in this kind of position where, we're that one person on stage, but there's like 200 people behind the stage that are making it happen. And people don't see those, all those teams.
Yeah, and I mean, this came out from our Chancellor's speech, where he was sharing the extension of the job retention scheme. And he was saying that the jobs that would be protected and the industries that would be protected, those that were viable. And yet there are industries and organizations that have been told, you cannot work, you cannot do anything. We've been closed down. And today in the news in the UK, other regions have been told that they have got tighter restrictions. Liverpool, Warrington, Hartlepool, Middlesbrough. We're hearing also that India is really having a really bad time. So we're sending virtual hugs to our Indian friends and colleagues. They're having a hard time. Italy seems to be having a better time. But so my take on this is, I feel a little bit abandoned, to be honest with you, James. I feel abandoned. So I'm a limited company director, and I couldn't furlough myself because I was dealing with events that were postponing and changing and cancelling. So I've had to work through this, but at the same time, we've not been able to do the business that we would normally do. Okay, yes, we've gone virtual and all that, but you're absolutely right in terms of the events industry. I've seen our colleagues in the meetings and events organisations; they're absolutely suffering. It's really hard out there.
So I'm wondering, because I was actually out with I was on a socially distanced cycle at the weekend with a friend. And he has a different opinion. He's probably a bit more of a libertarian about things. And he said, this is just creative destruction, James. This industry needs to, a lot of jobs need to go in this industry and new jobs will be created as a result. But if the government tries to come in and support jobs that are perhaps never really going to come back, that's going to be a bad thing because taxpayers have to pay for that as well. So what's your take on that, Maria?
Well, I think it's a really difficult one. I would not want to be in the government's position having to make these decisions, but I do think that directors of businesses who are, especially small businesses, who are the backbone of our country, need some help and support, because if we don't get help and support, we can't keep our staff. We can't do it. If we go under, everybody else goes under. So I think, and actually, there's a letter that's gone out from the Director General of the Institute of Directors here in the UK to their members. And, you know, John Geldart, who's saying the government's response continues to leave many limited company directors out of the main income support schemes, something that the IOD has stressed since the start of the crisis. And I agree with him. And it's even worse, it's a double whammy if you're actually in the hospitality or conference and meeting industry. I think it's very hard.
And I mean, it's interesting as we're kind of going through this. I was just on a call earlier today as we're doing a pre-event call with a client. It's in the client's in the Middle East. This is normally their big annual conference of the year, about 500 people attending. They have 26 speakers, and they're doing it all virtually with 26 speakers. And I'm actually the moderator of this particular event, and I'm looking at how they've designed it, and so it's all virtual. And I'm looking, and the stages look amazing. And there's the different demo areas, they look phenomenal, and the sponsors areas look incredible, and the speeches I've seen that have been pre-recorded look phenomenal because they're really well done. And I think that same event that's probably being run now by 5 people, roughly, would have taken 50, 100 people to run in the real world. And I kind of think about all those, and I think, and I had a conversation with a friend of mine who books conferences for his industry association, and he said, they're never going to go, they don't want to go back to the way it was. They'll maybe, instead of doing like 5 events a year, they're going to do 1 in-person event a year, and then the rest of them will be virtual. So are these jobs really ever going to come back?
That's interesting. We've actually got a comment. We've got a comment from Gary, who says there are lots of online conferences happening, but venues, tech teams, event producers, catering are all terribly affected. And we've been told not to say a certain word by someone who's very naughty. So I'm not going to read it because I'm not going to say the word. Okay,
the word that shall not be mentioned. No, you're absolutely right about that. About, you know, so my heart is going out to all of our AV teams or the event producers, and don't even get into the world of things like weddings, because that's a whole other area.
No. You know, we had to cancel ours. Yeah.
No. Yes. But dates are being booked, speakers are being booked. And on that note, I'd like to take a quick moment to thank one of our sponsors today, who is London Speaker Bureau. London Speaker Bureau is a global resource for corporations and governments for keynote speakers, executive learning masterclasses, and boardroom advisors. Representing some of the most influential business leaders and politicians in the world, they were named as the only global speaker bureau by International New York Times. You can find help in choosing a speaker for your next event by going to londonspeakerbureau.com. So thank you very much for the kind folks at London Speaker Bureau for coming on board. Shall we get into our next little story for today?
Yes, let's do that. We're talking tech, aren't we?
Tech. Geek. Let's geek out. So you sourced this story, and I thought this was kind of interesting. So give us all a little bit of the kind of how this kind of came about.
It actually came about from London Speaker Bureau. One of the exclusive speakers, a VIP speaker, was offered a studio in a box for his next presentation. So rather than having to go to a studio, the company booking him said, we'll send you a studio, and all the equipment arrives literally in a box. You have green screen, you have lights, you have microphone, camera, the works, and you just plug it all in. So plug and play. And I thought, what an excellent idea. And I think there's even more than one camera. There's various different options that you can choose. And so my question was, I mean, I know what I think. I'm wondering from your point of view, is it the speaker's responsibility, or is it the organizer's responsibility to organize the tech? I mean, we know in the old days and the old ways, or is it both?
Well, this is my take on it. Is if you are a class as a professional speaker, so you make the majority of your income from speaking professionally, virtually, in person, whatever, then I feel that you should be providing that equipment, and you should have a studio. And in fact, some of my other speaker friends, they've invested over $100,000 just in their studio. So the studio is great, and it's broadcast quality. However, if you're, let's say, you're an economist, or a CEO or chairperson of a company, or you're just an expert, you're an academic, but you're not speaking all the time. Speaking is just like a little part of what you do. I really don't think that you should really be investing in like lots and lots of equipment. I think that's where it maybe comes in for the client to provide, depending on what they want. So I was doing an event the other week, and I was the kind of professional speaker on it, but there were some other speakers who were really good experts in their area. And what the client did is they actually sent full film crews to their homes and to their offices, and they filmed everything there. And so the speaker just turned up themselves and just did their thing, but they didn't have to invest in all that equipment, because we know it's a little bit of a minefield when it comes to the equipment side of things.
Okay, so we've got a comment from a Facebook user. We don't always see the names on the Facebook, but it says, depends on the level of the production, and if the people putting the conference together want to de-risk potential tech issues. Absolutely. Very good. Chuck says, Gary, totally agree. Virtual works for this COVID time. Are you really expecting everything to go virtual? Closed venues, hotels, human interaction is always going to be wanted and needed. Absolutely. Facebook user, virtual is starting to get more complex and move away from just using Zoom. True.
Yeah.
So here's my take on it. I think, yes, it is the client's responsibility to make sure that the speaker has everything they need in order to look great and fantastic. However, I do think that the speaker should be using a decent camera of sorts anyway for briefing calls, etc. I think the speaker should be professional. If you're going to turn up for a face-to-face meeting, you're going to be professional. You're going to wear your suit. You're going to look smart. You're going to look the best you can. So therefore, you owe it to the client to do that when you're on a Zoom call or some kind of meeting too, that you should have great camera, great lighting, great sound, and not be wearing your pink bunny slippers, although maybe they can't see that.
And I think when it comes to technical, two things we should separate out is, one is the actual, the lights and the camera and all that side. The other one is the connection, the internet. So for example, just now I've got hardwired connection, and I have a backup, and I actually have a third backup as well, because I'm doing a lot of things live. But, the event I've got coming up, there's like 26 speakers, probably only 5 to 10 of those are actually doing it live. The majority are pre-recorded, because that takes out a lot of the stress for that production company, that events company. That means they've got them all ready. They can just kind of fire them up when they need to. So I think it also depends on, do you need to go live? And the kits that you sent me, Maria, they're actually great because they can do both. It's like you can do it all live, and you're pretty solid as long as you have an internet connection.
Yeah, fantastic. You are all belt and braces, aren't you? I bet you do. Do you wear a belt and braces?
No, braces. We need to get this weekend events braces. That's what's next.
So we've got some comments here. So we're getting they don't want to go back. Indeed, they're saving money on travel, food, accommodation, whatever compassion we have for stage builders, chefs, airlines, gala dinner experts. Money talks. The change wasn't necessarily going to happen, but it has happened. It's a very good point. Scott is saying spot on. I see too much nose hair. That depends who you're looking at, I think. Henry Rose says, I am with James. I think it's good to have a studio if you're a professional speaker. And so we do that. We have our own. We do that in our. We have. Anyway, because it's one of our main ways of earning, and yet I also love the studio in a box. What a wonderful idea. 20 years ago, they could do an airport in a box. I'm not kidding. What? Really? What?
Really? Okay. Well, talking about video and film, we want to give a quick shout out to a new sponsor that we have for this week, Neil Armstrong Films. This is someone that Maria works with a lot of her speakers as well. So Neil Armstrong Films provide a range of media from animation and 3D video graphics through to commercials and films for both business communication, so that's internal, external events as well. They can also do all of your training films, your conference videos, your website films, and last but no means least, speaker show reels, which we love. So their team is experienced, they're talented, they're flexible, as well as being really warm, friendly, and fun to work with. You can learn more by going to neilarmstrongfilms.com. I know, Maria, you work with them all the time.
We do. Listen, I've just discovered something by accident. But look at this. I can put the comments on the bottom. Look, buckle up. You're getting braces. I didn't know I could do that. So we can do that now. You see. And Henry Rose is saying, yes, really, an airport in a box. Fantastic. Wow, how cool is that? How cool is that?
So our third little story of the day is we're not going to get too political here, but there was the US presidential debate that happened this week, and it was spicy, let's say. And Chris Wallace there was the moderator from Fox News, and it's a tough job, moderation. So, Maria, I want to get your take on it first. First of all, what was your take on that? The role of the moderator. How did you think he did?
Well, actually, what's interesting, James, because I thought it was very sad that we had 3 old white men representing the US. And I think he should have been a she, to be honest with you, and maybe a young she, and maybe a black she. I think it was really not representative, and that was really sad. And I think it was 3 old men behaving like 3-year-olds. It was terrible. I don't think the moderator did a good job, but I also don't think that either participant did a good job. I think everybody was disrespectful, to be honest with you.
And it's hard. As coming up for this, because I knew we'd be talking about this today. I kind of look back in the history of these presidential debates, and the very first one was Abraham Lincoln and Douglas. He was one of the other candidate on the other side, on the Democratic side, and there was actually, this was the very first debate. I think they had 4 or 5 of them in a row, and a lot of people attended, like thousands of people were attending these, and there was no moderator, which blew my mind. And as I was looking into it, I suddenly realized that, and I've been to those events myself as well. A friend of mine, Majid Nawaz, who does stuff for LBC in London, the radio show with another speaker called Sam Harris, who talks about mindfulness and meditation. And they go and they do these like tens of thousands of people arenas, huge venues, and there's no moderator. And I was thinking, well, how can they do that? How can it work? And for me, it kind of comes down to respect. They respect each other. They disagree with each other, but they respect each other. And at that point, if you have that kind of mutual respect, then you have the basis to be able to kind of argue and debate either side.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I totally agree with you. And incidentally, on the news today, it was reported that Trump interrupted Biden 70 times. Can you believe that? 70 times in what was it, 90 minutes? Was that right?
Yeah.
About that?
Yeah, I didn't stay up to watch it live because I guessed based upon the rules that they'd set, it was going to be pretty bad as well. I mean, and this, I think when I think about moderation, as you know, I do a lot of kind of moderating events, and they're not always the easiest, especially with virtual as well, because there's a technical side that comes into it. And I think I look at those people who I think do it usually very well. I watched the other day on Newsnight on the BBC, and Emily Maitlis, who's usually fantastic as a moderator, and she's journalistic, so she's asking questions. She's maybe got 2 or 3 people who have got very different opinions, and she's pulling out those strands and challenging all of them, which she should be as a journalist. But she actually did, one of the most common errors I see moderators doing. I've done it myself as well, where if you have 2 or 3 people on the screen, they can't see you, so they're only hearing you often. And I think she said something, she asked a question, and by not saying the person's name, none of the guests knew who she was asking the question to. So suddenly everyone starts asking as well. So So it's definitely worth, if you're doing moderation, just kind of watching really good moderators and seeing how they do it. And some of them would lead with, I think you mentioned this about leading with the name. You like them leading with the name first.
Yeah. I like people leading with my name if I'm in a group, because I might not be paying attention. I might be, for example, reading the comments, which is, I'm going to see if I can do it. Look, here you are. Look, I put it there. There you go. Look at this. We get a picture. We get a name. This is great. I've only just discovered this bit of tech. This might be my tool of the week. I might change it. So, so our discourse adjusts to the popular media, hence the debate becoming a highly emotional but very low substance mudslinging competition. It did become that, which is such a shame. Such a shame.
Now, Maria, you represent some very, very high-profile speakers, and clients come to you because you work with some very high-profile VIP speakers. And I wondered, like, when they're asked to do like a fireside chat or moderation, do those speakers always want the questions in advance so they can prepare for them, or are they kind of happy just to kind of go with the flow and be kind of more improvisational?
Some do and some don't. So if it's a speaker who might have a controversial past, or might have an experience or expertise where they can't talk about everything, there might be things that they cannot talk about, then yes, you have to have all of the questions checked in advance. And some prefer to have them checked in advance just to ensure that it's on topic and it's relevant and they're happy to talk about it. And others are happy to go with the flow. It's very much a personal thing with the VIPs, very much a personal thing. But more often than not, it's the intermediary who wants to check and do the due diligence more than the actual person who's being asked the question, because they're experienced in being asked awkward questions and avoiding them in their lives, of course. But it's the intermediary who's trying to do their job and make sure that they have a job by protecting their VIP.
It's hard because I often think, the number one thing someone that's doing an event is, if they're the event manager for a particular event, is like the number one thing is don't get fired. Your part of your role is you're de-risking things as well. And I've come up with, I've had to moderate events, and it's gone through like the questions have gone through 5 different layers, from corporate comms to their investor people to the CEO to their assistant. And by the end of it, the question that you thought was a really good question has ended up in this speak that it bears no resemblance to what you originally wanted to ask in the first place. But
yeah, you're ending up asking what they had for breakfast. Yeah, I know. So here's an interesting question here. I noticed the BBC are using the mute button a lot. Should moderators have a mute button? I think certainly they needed a mute button in the debate. What's your view? Should you have a mute button?
This is the benefit of virtual. I know we say sometimes that virtual is the poor relation to in-person, but actually with virtual, it's actually quite nice to be able to go and it just, so I believe in the next series of US presidential debates, there will be a mute button. If there's going to be any other presidential debates, I don't know. Maybe they've decided maybe this is not the format that they want anymore.
Well, I found it fascinating that there's an actual commission that oversees the US presidential debate. I didn't know that. And they're changing the rules because of what happened this week. Surely they shouldn't need to change the rules because people behaved badly. They just need to sort of slap their wrists. But anyway, let's see what other comments we've got. We've also got a comment here from Scott. Seen Douglas Murray moderating Peterson and Harris. Great job.
Yeah, Douglas Murray. Douglas is quite spiky. I'm sure he was going to go for those kind of questions.
Yeah. I'm going to show this, but we're not allowed to say it. All right. Oh, sorry. Wrong one. There was a message here. Oh, where is it? Here we are. This is the one. Don't say it. Okay. We're just
like in Shakespeare. If you work in the theatre, you're not allowed to say.
Yeah, certain things. I'm loving this new gadget that I could put the comments on.
So actually, talking about gadgets, we always at the end of each episode, and thanks for everyone's comments as well and questions, and just please keep them coming. We always do our tool of the week. So we should probably explain what this is, Maria, what the tool of the week is.
Absolutely. So a tool of the week is either an app or a gadget that James and I have discovered or are using and think is fantastic, or it's a person who's a total tool. Now, I did have a person who's a total tool, but actually I'm going to go with an app instead. Aren't I boring? But before we do that, there are some more comments. Look, they're still coming in. They're flooding in. This one has flooded in. Increased production, lower costs. All bosses want this. COVID has delivered. Yeah.
No, it's true as well. But I would say, so in terms of production value, absolutely. I still find my wife was attending a virtual conference recently for her industry. She's in the legal field, and it was an incredibly boring conference. I sat and I kind of I could watch it over her shoulder, and I thought, who is curating this? This was like, and we want this more experiential, because the way I feel with virtual, with virtual events, we're not competing with other events anymore. We're competing with Netflix. We're competing with computer games. So it's a different way of thinking. So tools. Let's talk about our tools of the week. I'll go. My one, which I'm loving, is Ecamm Pro. In fact, I'm using Ecamm. I believe you're using
Ecamm. So Ecamm Live, the Pro version, yes?
Yes. So this is...
We look so good.
Yeah, it allows people like green screen things and do all this kind of fancy stuff. And we're probably using 1% of the functionality of it. But they have a new version coming out soon, or maybe today, I think it is, interview style. So you can bring people in, do shows like we're doing just now. Super, super easy. The only thing I would say is, if you are going to use Ecamm, make sure your computer is powerful enough. I tried to use it on my laptop initially, and it sounded like a 747 trying to take off. So that's the only proviso I would give. So that's Ecamm Live, and we're going to have all the links to all of these things we're mentioning at thisweekinevents.com as well. So Maria, what's your tool of the week?
Well, my tool of the week is actually anchor.fm, which is a wonderful podcast hosting platform, and it's just so easy to use. And in fact, we have turned This Week in Events into a podcast, so people can listen in if they want it on the go. If they don't want to watch and see our beautiful faces, they can hear our wonderful voices instead. And so it's just incredibly easy to use. Love it, and it's free.
So we're now on in the interwebs as a podcast. If you go to Spotify now, I know it's kind of gone through that. At some point soon, we'll be able to ask our Alexa apps, I'm sure, to play the show. Maybe that's coming up next week. Maybe we have that for you next week. So we'll put all these links here as well. I just want to get, before we start to finish up, just final thanks to our sponsors this week. London Speaker Bureau, thank you very much for coming on board and sponsoring, and also Neil Armstrong Films. You can go to neilarmstrongfilms.com. So I think we're pretty much up. Do we have any kind of final comments from anyone?
I'll let you read the comments this time, shall I?
So when moderating online, if the audience are invited to post questions in chat, I like to have a wing woman to WhatsApp me. Exactly. That's a great jest, Jerry, of good questions, so I can focus on the discussions facilitating. That is a really, really good point. I do exactly the same thing, because otherwise, I end up finding I'm squinting my eyes trying to see, like I'm doing.
You're letting me do all the squinting. I noticed, and we've got one more from Alison as well. Yep. In my world, online conferences are competing with sourdough bread making.
No competition. No, I know which I can prefer. So, well, thank you everyone for coming and joining us for another week of This Week in Events. My name is James Taylor, keynote speaker and founder of Speakers U.
And that's James Taylor. Sorry, and I'm Maria Franzoni. Goodbye from me.
Take care. Have a wonderful week, everyone.
Bye-bye.